with assistance from the Van Leer Foundation, created the Center of Early Childhood Education. History was rhyming, but it was not the imperial government and missionaries of the various denominations that were the prime partners. This time, it was the Ministry of Education, Jamaica Teachers Association, and the university who were the partners in this venture. DRB was a man of that moment. DRB was a visionary. He looked at the same system that has operated for over 130 years and saw it differently. What was required in this moment was not imitation from abroad or imposition from above, but was the creation of the people themselves. He saw the lifting of this level as the means of lifting and changing the entire society. He saw things differently and he understood their strategic importance. DRB was a man of great faith. It is only faith that allows you to accept such a venture, because it is reaching into what is not known and pursuing it with passion. DRB was a man of great fidelity with resources. He used the resources of the Van Leer Foundation in ways that were absolutely consistent with what they were granted for. Because of all of these, DRB could be trusted. Because in the final analysis, it is trust that really builds society. It has been my superlative privilege to make this tribute, because usually people are forgotten very shortly after they pass. But DRB Grant continues to be remembered because of that vision and that ability to see something different, to seize the opportunity and to build from the bottom up.
Perry to make a presentation on instructional design for resilience.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Just waiting for this to pop up. Presentation. Thank you all for having me. I came here down from New York, and I'm glad to be here. I don't know if you know, but we are celebrating a holiday up there. Currently, it's Thanksgiving, and it's where we all sit around and we eat too much, and we fight about politics and religion, and I spend way too much time with my in-laws. So thank you for inviting me down. No, I love my mother-in-law, and I've known her for probably 25 years, and like Dr. Tortello, I don't look it, right? So thank you so much. Today I'm going to be talking about instructional design. I'm an instructional designer and a faculty trainer, And I'm hoping that today I'll give you some practical resources, and this will be a little interactive because I know I have the session after lunch, so please don't fall asleep. And has anybody heard of Go Noodle, by the way? Do you know what program that is? So in the states, in the school districts for the young kids, they sometimes have a hard time sitting and doing worksheets all day, right? Because we know play-based learning is super important for young kids. And just like here or any other country, we have a hard time implementing that in the curriculum, right? That we need to incorporate more play. So we have started something where we kind of get the wiggles out in the beginning. So if you want to stand up and we can kind of get the wiggles out and move around a little bit, it helps kids kind of get focused and centered on the learning. And I'm sure we can all use a stretch break. But in this Go Noodle program, if you look it up, you can Google it, some really fun music and dancing and rhymes, and it's learning at the same time. It's a really great program that they do have in international settings as well. Okay. So how do we use instructional design for resilience, or how do we use digital tools in order to strengthen preparedness and sustainability in early childhood education? So I'm going to share a couple suggestions that I've had working with UNICEF and on the Learning Passport program, which is a learning management system, an entire program that Jamaica does have in UNICEF. And I will talk about some of those experiences that have been really helpful. One thing that I subscribe to with climate education is climate action pedagogy. If you know what that is, you can raise your hand. No? Okay, so climate action pedagogy is the idea that we integrate climate education into all the subjects. So instead of it just being a science-based curriculum, we weave it into things like music and fine arts and math and English. And so that we are doing things like encouraging kids to do fine and performing arts as a way to express their feelings and do creativity and to learn about the climate and express themselves about what just happened through those fine and performing arts. Math and English subjects can integrate word problems and stories about nature and the environment, as an example. A second tip that I would say that has worked is designing learning that works in a blended learning format. So if you Google UNICEF Blended Learning Handbook, I co-authored that handbook, and it's basically provides, it's for educators, and I know we have a lot of educators in the room. I'm an educator or former educator. I've taught future teachers educational technology, and so I really think it's super important to teach digital literacy skills to teachers and to design content that can work asynchronously and synchronously and in blended formats so that we can keep that continuity of instruction during emergency settings. And some of the ways this can work even with young learners is doing things like, having children spend time outdoors, bring in the natural environment, pieces to the natural environment into the classroom, but also if we don't have books or we're in low resource settings, we can use digital books and display those and integrate those digital pieces into the curriculum in our teaching and learning as well. So I'm going to do a couple examples of using AI. We may say to ourselves, where does AI fit here? And we're talking about climate, we're talking about ECE, that's not important. It is important. It's important to not be left behind in the digital divide. And we have to make sure that we're keeping on top of those digital literacy skills. But also, AI can actually help us with creating content and improving teaching and learning. And so I'm sharing a couple of cool tools that have been created and one that you can use right away. So I'll share that with you. Also, we have already talked about the importance of early childhood education on outcomes a bunch of times. And I think a lot of people have been citing that Perry-Prue School study. And everybody here knows the importance of early childhood education. But there's also this study I encourage you to look up, and I should be looking over here, sorry. And this particular study is a longitudinal study, and it shows the importance of educating students about climate change early on and what the outcomes of that result in. And so it shows that education is the #1 factor that reduces deaths from climate disasters. Women's education is the strongest impact of all. And that education helps people understand warnings, make good decisions, stay healthier, earn more, and recover faster. And we know in this particular study and other studies as well that income alone does not protect people, that education does. So it says in this study, countries that expand schooling can see up to 60% fewer disaster deaths. For this means for Jamaica, investing in children's learning today strengthens national resilience for decades. And I'm not going to go all, just going to skip over this because we already talked about this study a bunch of times today. So if we want climate-resistant Jamaica by 2050, the most powerful investment is not seawalls or sensors. It's 3- and 4-year-olds in high-quality preschools today. Who agrees with that? Okay, here's that, one of the tools that I promised I would share with you today. This is one of my co-researchers. Before the hurricane hit, I was going to share one of my recent academic articles and some research that I've been doing on AI digital learning materials. Dr. Sonia Tawari created this AI tool with Play Lab. It's really simple to use. And if you want to scan it with your phone, you're more than welcome to. It's free. And what it's used for is in low resource settings. It's made for educators and for parents and caregivers to think up ways to play with their children with like very little materials. And you enter in the number of materials you have, the number of minutes you have in the day that you have available. So you could say, I only have like 3 things right here. I have 15 minutes, and how many kids you have to, you're going to be entertaining or playing with. And then there's an accessibility note you fill in, and it'll say whether or not the children that you're working with are, have any accessibility things like cognitive disabilities or blind, deaf, etc. And you can add additional notes. So I did this, and I also said, I'd like to create some playful activities with a group of 20 children. I'm an early childhood educator. I have 20 minutes, and I have 4 objects. Tell me what I can do. And then you'll see on the slides, it gives you a couple of ideas of like a nature treasure circle and an earth relay team game. So you can kind of read that and interact with this particular tool if you like, and see what it comes up with. So just very simple AI tool that I think is really helpful and implementation ready. Another thing that you can do as an instructional designer, curriculum developer, or even an educator is to create content using vibe coding. So we can actually create digital learning materials even if we don't know how to code with, say, like HTML. By prompting one of these tools. So ChatGPT is probably the tool that most people are familiar with, so that's why I chose that as a screenshot here. And I wrote in the prompt, this is just a screenshot, but I wrote in the prompt that I'm looking to create an interactive digital flashcard game that children can interact with on the smart board, and they can click on the words and learn the very basic vocabulary words of climate education. So things related to like the beach or sand or so forth. And as I prompted that in, it created the code, and I was able to upload it to the Learning Passport, and it's now an interactive game that teachers can use, and it's ready to go. I also showed an example on the right-hand side of Google Gemini, because a lot of our school districts, I know in many countries are Google Classroom, or you may have a Google Gemini account. I used a free one, and you can create all kinds of digital learning materials just prompting Google Gemini as well. So these are just free ways to create materials in low resource settings that are able to be used with teachers. Here is a really great organization that I would recommend as well, Subject to Climate, and you can look them up as well, and you can find lesson plans and interactive activities broken down by age and level and topic, all related to climate. And it can be related to English, math, science, art, all subject areas, but it's basically integrates climate education, and everything is editable. So when you go in and you say, okay, I really like this, but I want it to be more contextualized to the Jamaican curriculum, I can go in, edit that Google Doc that is a lesson plan, and change anything I want, and then adapt it and use it. And these are all created by teachers. Every single thing that's in here is created by teachers and vetted, very high quality. And we've worked with them before, so I highly recommend checking them out. Another organization that that we're currently chatting with is Take Action Global. If you want, you can scan this QR code. I actually took a screenshot of this activity guide, and there was a page in there that was specifically calling out something that was an example that Jamaica had done, where they're taking like a pledge, like a climate action pledge. And then in that lesson, they had a suggestion to read the book, I Can Do My Part. That book exists on the Learning Passport. It also exists on Bookshare. So these are all Jamaica specific, and it's a wonderful organization that's free to use as well. So that's a great climate education partner. This is another wonderful organization called the Climate and Mental Health Network, because we know we've talked about this a bunch of times today. Kids can't learn if they're not well, and being well is not just physical health, but it's also mental health. And we know we need to talk with children, and sometimes it can be hard. When I bought my house, 2 weeks after I bought it, it flooded, and then I had to rebuild. And then that was in March of 2009. And then Hurricane Sandy hit a few years later, and I had to evacuate, and I practically lost my house, and I was out of my house for a whole month, had to come back and rebuild again. So I was very busy and very distracted and overwhelmed with young children. In my attempt to relocate, my youngest decided she wanted to cut her hair as I was packing, and so she chopped off all of her long hair. It was a very stressful time that I remember. So it can be hard for parents to sit down and have these conversations about what is going on around them when they're trying to figure out what are they doing next and how to get by every day. So in this particular organization, Climate Mental Health Network, there's a guide in there for parents and caregivers and how to talk to children about climate in age-appropriate ways, broken down by level. And there's also wonderful things in there about that teachers can do. I love the climate emotions wheel. This is developed by a psychologist, and it has all these different emotions, and it helps children to name their emotions of what they're feeling after a climate disaster, or about the climate in general, because face it, we've all been having some climate anxiety, right? And so it helps them. What you could do is you could hang this up in your classroom, and people can come and they can put their name up and like kind of say, how am I feeling today about the climate? And when you name it, you can tame it, right? That's what Dr. Siegel says. And it helps to validate things, and they feel heard. So you can scan that QR code to get to that organization. I have a couple slides on them because I really love them so much. On the right-hand side is an interpretation for early childhood or primary, where children may not be able to read yet or write yet, but you can help them create their own climate emotions wheel by labeling what they feel, and then they color in kind of what that feels like. So almost like a mandala, if anyone is familiar with like the act of creating a mandala, which is healing and it's creativity. They're writing, they're like creating what they feel in this like artistic form, and it helps them to talk about it and to visualize it. So that's like with crayons or markers. Again, if we are in a low resource setting and we don't have those materials or the schools are closed, I created a similar type of material with Canva, vibe coding, and put that on the Learning Passport. And so if you need continuity of instruction, again, all you need is a phone and you can get access. Yes, we don't want young children on devices all day. It's not ideal, but for us, we don't want extended periods of time with no learning at all, right? So it's an option. I also created a version where they were using emojis instead of words, because sometimes we have children with cognitive disabilities, and the way that they might want to communicate is through those expressions. And so they can use like stamp those faces and how they're feeling as well. So there's different ways that you could kind of code or vibe code or create these materials. And I promise you, this is a very easy activity. And on the left-hand side, you can kind of see that's basically like the prompt I created, and it made it for me. It's getting easier and easier for people, even with low digital literacy skills, to create digital learning materials. And that's about it. I tried to keep it short because we covered a lot of the things I was going to talk about today. Please keep in touch. I put my LinkedIn up here, and I'd be happy to chat with you all about faculty training and AI. Oh, yes, Jamaica.learningpassport.org. If you go to that website, you'll see some of the materials on there related to grades 1 through 4 now, with soon to be 5 as well, and teacher training materials. More will be added, including climate education materials, now that I'm here in town and finally getting to see Rebecca in person. I'm hoping to be adding some more materials for her.
But also early childhood.
Yeah, early childhood.
And some trainings that Dawn has done in the past, going into deeper explanations of AI and how AI can be used to make people's lives easier.
Yes, over the summer I did some extensive AI teacher training with Jamaican educators from like May to August, almost, I guess monthly.
Almost 800 teachers.
Yes, 800 teachers. We had to, yeah, we even have, I think, a couple of YouTube recordings that we can share. Yeah. So if anybody has a couple of questions. Yeah.
Is there any
especially in relation to climate?
Yeah, I think that we have some, do you use assisted devices in the classroom? And I know UNICEF has a program called Accessible Digital Textbooks Initiative. Tomorrow when I'm doing the panel, I'm going to touch a little bit about it, but I would recommend reaching out to Dr. Tortello, who is here. Those particular resources are 100% digitally accessible for all kinds of learners. So whether you have cognitive disabilities, hearing impairments, visual impairments, all learners can access it. It actually creates the content in plain language and speaks out, reads aloud. It's really wonderful. We have several of them on the Learning Passport as well, but hopefully more will be produced soon.
Thank you.
No. Coming.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm sorry you have to be missing Thanksgiving, but we're glad you're here with us. I have two quick questions for you. The first one is about just your thoughts on the kind of balance between using AI, because it's pretty bad for the environment, and the fact that, we're using it for this climate, resilience. I'm just thinking about that. I believe in AI and the power for it to help us, but I always pull back a little bit because of that climate issue. So that's the first one. And then also, do you have any suggestions for how we get more teachers, especially at this level, to be comfortable with AI tools to kind of harness the power that they can, provide for teaching and learning?
Sure, those are two really excellent questions. The first one is I actually have a mapping of AI tools that have been mapped against security, privacy, data, and climate impact. And so you can look at them and see which ones are the best as far as most, best for the environment versus worse. It also is broken down by level, what is most appropriate for, say, 13 and above, or teachers, or it's also broken down by type of tool. So whether it's for image generation, video generation, teaching tool. And I'm happy to share that or even put that on the Learning Passport so that you have access to that tool. It's been vetted by Common Sense Media and a GitHub of 100 different questions that has been verified by those organizations that are listed on that mapping sheet. So it's an Excel document, so I always check with that, and I've shared that with the head of ICTD of UNICEF as well. So it's really a great resource. The second question was about helping teachers who may be hesitant. I get that a lot. In fact, I even see that in higher ed, that faculty at first, we are now in the early majority phase, but when we were in the early adopter phase of AI, a lot of faculty had pushback and was like, nobody should use it. I'm completely banning it. We're only going to do written essays and oral presentations, and that's not really the answer, because we do want to prepare our children for the future 21st century skills, and we do want to upskill our teachers as well, because we care about their professional development and their future job growth too. However, we want to make sure that they're acting in ethical ways, so it's important that we make sure that professional development has frameworks and it has training that is teaching teachers how to use it in ethical ways, that there's policy built around that. And as far as hesitation, I'd say progress over perfection. We don't have to make teachers use everything. See what is their hesitation, find out what that is. Because I'm an academic, I always like to show the literature, and I follow certain academics that are doing studies with AI. and kind of show what other people have done so that they can see what has worked in terms of, don't do this because this may be cognitive offloading, or this has been proven to help with learning outcomes, right? So I try to show those types of things to instructors to help improve their confidence in using it. And just kind of starting small. I think using your other faculty members within your school district that are doing things already is helpful too, and so that they can have them teach each other to use a community of practice, and so they have that support around them. Any other?
Thank you so much, Dr. DePerry, for your presentation and for fielding those questions. I'll also pause to advise you that tomorrow, Dr. Rebecca Tortello will speak on accessible digital textbooks, so we can listen out for that. At this time, we now welcome Professor Elsa Leorini to deliver her keynote address, Teachers as Nation Builders. Professor Leorini.
Look, they're very different, aren't they? Colleagues and friends, practitioners, it is a great joy for me to be here this afternoon. And I just want to say that DRB Grant would be ecstatic if he could still be here. I have had the pleasure of working with him, and so I know that this colloquium would make him very, very happy. Dudley Ransford Brandeis, DRB Grant. He was born in Colombia 110 years ago, and it is a testament that 37 years after his death in 1988, his life and work are still being celebrated. I want to congratulate those who have organized this colloquium and the JN Foundations who have funded it. It is timely and urgent, as we have seen. Well, I have seen, since just being in the room this morning, today, that research has created so much more knowledge of our children's early learning years that forums such as this are critical for sharing information and ideas for use in the policy and planning for early childhood education and development as we move into the second quarter of the 21st century. I am honored to have been asked to share my knowledge of and experience of working with DRB, whose vision and action have left us a legacy which serves as a foundation for our continued work in this field. Thank you very much for inviting me. DRB was a Michael man. Okay. And he worked at the primary and tertiary levels of the Jamaican educational system from 1942 to 1961, during which time he pursued graduate programs in the UK and the USA, returning to Jamaica in the early 1960s. Now today, we have been looking forward. And it's as if we've been looking through the windscreen of the vehicle we're using to go forward. But I want us to look through the rearview mirror for a little while, back to when Mr. Grant started and where we're coming from. Because although we do look forward, and there is much to look forward to, I think it's important for us also to be able to see the roots of our origin and how it all came about. Because 60 years ago, there could not have been any discussion like this, because children under the age of 6 years old did not go to any formal school in Jamaica. They were people would gather them on their verandas and have little sessions with them, or they would be tied to chairs so that they do not venture outside, or they would be just left in the care of an older child who would give oversight, but they did not have any stimulation. They did not have any formal interaction. And very often, and it wasn't that people were awful, it's just that they didn't understand that children at this age were just like little sponges ready to absorb whatever they could about the environment, and so they were not exposed. Mr. Grant, in his travels, was very, very, very impressed by two projects in the United States, which I know you know, everybody knows about Project Head Start, and everybody knows about High School Prayer Project. And these were designed to improve the educational readiness of low-income preschool children and break the cycle of poverty. And they catered to children's emotional, social, health, nutritional, psychological needs. That sounds familiar, like, you know, we're still seeing that in the windscreen, through the windscreen. That's what we're seeing. But on his return to Jamaica in the early 1960s, Mr. Grant was recruited by the UWI, as we heard from Professor Miller, to begin to form the Institute of Education. DRB focused on early childhood. He decided that the strategy being employed internationally could be replicated in Jamaica in the basic schools, since these were not organized, they were privately run, and not under any educational authority, and situated in very deprived communities. The Institute of Education in 1963 had already begun periodic training sessions in early childhood education, led by a lecturer from overseas, Miss Barbara Priestman, and she was assisted in this training by Jamaican lecturers Dr. Don Wilson and Dr. Ruby King. The late Sir Hugh Springer, who was the registrar of the UWI, used his influence to assist Mr. Grant to obtain funding from the Bernard van Leer Foundation in The Hague, the Netherlands, and that led to the establishment of the Project for Early Childhood Education, or PECE, in 1966, and Mr. Grant was appointed project director. He established the Center for Early Childhood Education on the UWI Mona campus, on the first floor of what was then the UWI Computing Center. The CECE was constructed by the Bernard van Leer Foundation to house the secretariat and project staff for the project in early childhood education. Dudley Grant's model of education for basic schools in Jamaica included concepts of functional interactivity and educare. He considered the community to be a living laboratory, so he met the children where they were, in their communities, and he used cultural activities. He emphasized play, songs, games, drama, being able to draw, act out their feelings. The functional interactivity was using the community entities so that, for instance, the child being sent to the shop, the child going to the shop learned that a small amount of sugar was quarter pound, you know, and a large amount of sugar was 1 pound. And they learned that they could get two loaves of bread and how much that cost. So they got an idea of number, not from being told to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they got a concept of number. So this is how he used functional interactivity within the community. Educare now brought in the parents, because the parents were the caregivers, but he wanted the parents to know how to educate the children. He wanted them to understand that children were not just little people sent around to aggravate them, but but that they were learners, they could learn, they were learners. So his community became the living laboratory for his initiatives, and he encouraged the exploration and experimentation of the children, the interaction of socialization and education, and the involvement of parents, family members, and the community in the care and education of the child were critical. The link with the community and the idea of partnerships in the delivery of early childhood care and education were very important features. The revolutionary vision of Mr. Grant, this functional interactivity established at the outset of the basic school movement, now seems very commonplace, given the voices of more recent and more famous advocates which tell us that it takes a village to raise a child. Such was the success of the PECE that basic schools were sponsored by local churches and housed in church halls, private sector organizations, service clubs, voluntary organizations, and overseas groups adopted schools. Within the community itself, parents served as volunteers. They provided hot lunches for children, kept the school clean. They repaired and maintained furniture and premises. An island-wide network was established with sponsoring bodies relating to each other through committees and parish boards, and these parish boards were linked through the National Association of Parish Boards, which formalized the network of sponsoring bodies. And I mention this in particular because the association was headed by a close associate of Mr. Grant, who supported his efforts very strongly, the late Mr. Keith Brown. The project started out as a 3-year experimental program designed to apply the current theories of learning and teaching and child development to the solution of certain problems in the island's pre-primary schools. The project team included stalwarts in early childhood education like Mrs. Joyce Jarrett and Mrs. Faye Carruthers, as well as other dedicated educators, and it was based on Mr. Grant's philosophy, which we shared earlier. The major strategy employed was the training of the teachers, some of whom were also mothers, all of whom lived in and were part of the community in which the children lived. And we had that excellent testimony from one of the teachers of Mr. Grant's early initiatives. The primary objective was to have the children guided in their development by teachers who were professionally trained and who understood, loved, and were committed to them. So the whole concept was educare, educare. The training of paraprofessionals was an innovative and exciting experience, and this is where I came in because Mr. Grant took hold of me when I had just started working at the university and told me that I had to come and work with him. And I could not tell him no because he was my church brother. So he approached me from different angles. So the provision of both cognitive and professional development opportunities for the paraprofessionals was achieved through the Classroom Competency-Oriented Program, or the CCOP, of the Project for Early Childhood Education. And that CCOP became a model program, not only for all of Jamaica, but also for countries in the Caribbean and other parts of the world. So there was the training of the paraprofessionals and the mobilization of resources. The CCOP served as a model for Jamaica's community-based programs, and several other developing countries have adopted it. It included involvement of community members, curriculum development, improvement of school facilities, etc. The basic school teachers in many instances had little or no secondary level education, but he was able to draw on their creativity and initiative to devise methods of stimulating the minds of the preschool children and encourage their cognitive and social and emotional development. They didn't have expensive toys, but one of the things which the teachers did was to develop teachables, what he called teachables from trashables. It was a publication where the handbook demonstrated the ingenuity of using milk and juice cartons, empty thread spools, plastic bottles, and other trash as teaching resources 60 years ago. Now we have AI, you know. But it was very, very creative. Dudley Grant regarded the success of the PEC as the beginning of a much larger initiative. The Project for the Advancement of Childhood Education, PACE, which you'll see in the middle there, succeeded the PECE in 1973, and it was also sponsored by the Bernard Van Leer Foundation. The major thrust of PACE was to attract new partners, and what happened with the deepening of the teacher education process went through the development of resource centers. There was one in each parish to service the needs of the basic schools in that parish. So the resource centers now became the community reference point. So the communities within each parish could use these resource centers. So like the trashables and other things, the teachers would meet and learn how to use these things and interact to how they could use them in their basic schools. Remember, there was no internet, and there was no email, and there was no WhatsApp, right? So the training of persons to manage these centers, and then the offering of a certificate of education and then a Bachelor of Education program in collaboration with the University of the West Indies. And the North Coast Project, which was responsible for developing materials and other teaching resources for use in the resource centers and basic schools. Several people have remained true to PACE, the Project for Advancement of Childhood Education. And in fact, we have a group in Canada called Women for PACE, which still supports, through the Early Childhood Commission, some of the initiatives for our early childhood initiative. But they also have expanded to support initiatives in Canada for preschoolers. So in a sense, we have a branch of PACE in Canada as well. One of the initiatives which the Women for PACE did, which I thought was an excellent initiative, and somehow we have not been able to sustain it, but the Tech the Bus project in 2009 featured a bus equipped with computers to serve as a mobile computer laboratory. I don't know if any of you remember that. Remember the Tech the Bus? It was donated to Jamaica's Ministry of Education by the Women for PACE in Canada. And it was highly innovative. And PACE still awards scholarships to teachers in training and has greatly assisted teacher trainees as well. Teacher education and training was a major concern. Training for the paraprofessionals, which had been part of the PECE, did not result in any recognition of the trainees as professionals, and the training was insufficient to meet the growing needs island-wide. A breakthrough was the acceptance of the paraprofessional basic school teachers. Remember, the paraprofessional basic school teachers were now able to pursue the certificate in education at the University of the West Indies. And this then became the matriculation criterion for them to do a bachelor's degree in education. It was taught over 8 summers. It was called the Summer B.Ed program. It has not been replicated since, but it was a fantastic program. It was sponsored by the Bernard Van Leer Foundation and the UWI and the government of Jamaica. It was specially designed for these basic school teachers with educational qualifications gained through the Certificate of Education to enter a degree program and qualify for a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. It was began in 1984, and it was held over 6 summers. The staging of the program over 6 summers allowed for observation and assessment of practice in the classrooms and schools of participants during the intervening academic years. That was a fantastic program, really amazing. But Mr. Grant didn't only function on the establishment of basic schools, research centers, and teacher training. He was concerned that policy and practice with regard to early childhood education be guided by thorough research into the lives of the children for whom this education was being developed. Bernard Van Leer's Foundation supported this approach and provided the funding necessary for Mr. Grant to undertake research. And in 1971, he produced a monograph entitled Living Conditions of Some Basic School Children, Pointers to Disadvantage. And in 1978, he developed the Lifestyle Study, a research project which was also funded by Bernard Van Leer, and which was designed to document the lifestyles of children in the lesser world of the English-speaking Caribbean. 5 monographs were produced by different researchers between 1980 and 1984. DRB Grant became a highly respected international authority in the field of early childhood education, serving as a consultant for projects in countries the Bahamas, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Malaysia, Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Colombia, Venezuela, and Spain. And I will share a story about Mr. Grant. Mr. Grant is a very jovial person, loved to give jokes, but he found humor in a lot of areas. Among his consultancies was one in which he was asked to speak on the Jamaican model of early childhood education in South Africa, apartheid South Africa. Now, in order to allow him, as a black man, to speak at this conference of white educators, he was given the designation honorary white. He found humor in the grim irony of this action, recounted the story on several occasions, laughing heartily every time. In 1978, he retired from the UWI. With the financial support and assistance of Bernard Van Leer and other funding agencies, he continued devising, designing, and delivering projects to enhance early childhood in Jamaica. In 1984, the Teenage Mothers Project was launched in Maypen, Clarendon, with funding from UNICEF and Bernard Van Leer, directed by Mrs. Joyce Jarrett. It provided supervised daycare for the children of teenage mothers, allowing them to complete their education. It also provided parenting education for both mothers and fathers of the children. Out of the Teenage Mothers Project, the Roving Caregivers Project was started in 1986, which trained rovers to visit poor and deep rural areas to provide guidance to families in the early stimulation and care of children birth to 3 years. The Roving Caregivers Program received UNICEF's prestigious Maurice Pate Award in 2000, and the program has been replicated in the Eastern Caribbean, in St. Lucia, Grenada, Dominica, Belize, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The partnerships are set out there. The families of the children, the community, the Bernard Van Leer Foundation, the government, and certain private and public sector organizations formed the basis for the development and growth of a vibrant basic school movement. The late Mr. Keith Brown records DRB's missionary zeal to convince government that early childhood development could not be allowed to remain on the education back burner. Remember, all of this was taking place with the Ministry of Education just having a toe in, but not being fully involved in early childhood education apart from the infant schools which were fully funded. And 53 years ago, in 1972, the Ministry of Education institutionalized early childhood education. And by 1974, an early childhood education unit had been established to spearhead the horizontal expansion of the highly successful PECE. Education officers were appointed to oversee various aspects of the program, and the ministry provided a salary subsidy, not salaries, a salary subsidy for basic school teachers in schools which met certain operational criteria. Mr. Grant also played a pivotal role in the design and organization of the Hope Valley Experimental School, which deserves special mention because it was founded as a primary school to integrate disabled children, mainly from the Sir John Golding Rehabilitation Center on the UWI campus, with able-bodied children living in the area. In other words, they were not being educated separately, but they were being mainstreamed within this experimental school, which is still called an experimental school, by the way. During his career, he authored a number of manuscripts and monographs and received a number of honors and awards. In recognition of his contribution to early childhood education, the UWI, MONA, in 1996 named this Center for Early Childhood Education the Dudley Grant Early Childhood Resource Center, which is one of our sponsors of this colloquium. In 1999, the Bernard Van Leer Foundation celebrated its Golden Jubilee, and the centerpiece of these celebrations was the presentation of the Oscar Van Leer Award to the basic school movement in Jamaica. The DRB Grant Resource Center and Basic School were also established in 2009 by the Ministry of Education and located in Catherine Hall, Montego Bay, the parish in which Mr. Grant grew up. Sadly, I have to tell you, both these facilities have suffered severe damage as a result of Hurricane Melissa. The legacy. The Dudley Grant Memorial Trust was established in 1989 in memory of this father of basic schools in Jamaica. That has been disputed, but I think we do need to recognize that much of the foundation of what we have today and much of what we know and can use when we make our forward movement looking through that windscreen has come from Mr. Grant's work and the work which he spearheaded. Seed money for the trust was provided by Bernard Van Leer Foundation from unspent funds, approximately $500 US, following an emergency relief project to repair basic schools damaged by Hurricane Gilbert in September 1988, a month after Mr. Grant died. The mission of the trust is to be a center of excellence whose primary function is to advocate on behalf of early childhood education and development, early childhood development in Jamaica. The trustees are a mix of education and other professionals and business people. Although the trust's role was intended to be primarily advocacy, over the 30-plus years of its existence, several projects have been undertaken as the trust was able to garner funding to support areas of priority and significance in early childhood education, as well as care and development. The trust has worked with several partners. As you can see, there's a listing there: the Bernard Van Leer Foundation, UWI, Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, Ministry of Education, Chase Fund, JSIF, Jamaica National Group of Companies, the Jamaica Early Childhood Commission, international and bilateral donor agencies, UNICEF, Women for Pace Canada, George Brown College Canada, American Friends of Jamaica, National Baking Company from Jamaica Producers Limited. Mr. Grant's The Early Childhood Movement in Jamaica, Building Blocks for the Future is a book which was produced in 2004, written by Myrtle Gaynor and Joyce Thompson. And this has been an important resource for students preparing to be teachers in the early childhood sector. The Trust participated in the development of and endorsed the Early Childhood Commission Act, which set out the legislative and regulatory framework for the Early Childhood Commission to support implementation of operational standards and regulations in the early childhood sector. The commission was officially launched in May 2004, and you can tell from presentations this morning, the commission has undertaken a massive job and now plays a major role in the functioning of early childhood across the island, for which I know Mr. Grant would be very, very excited. After 2005, the Bernard Van Leer Foundation ceased funding projects in the Caribbean, leaving the trust without that major source of project funding. Collaboration with the Environmental Foundation Jamaica and another new partner, the Culture, Health, Arts, Sports and Education Chase Fund, established by the government of Jamaica, came on board. And as a result, we've had a number of projects. Our project director, Mrs. Cecile Minot, I know she's not here, but the project director during that period gave oversight to the building of capacity and promoting sustainability in the 17 early childhood resource centers, which had been originally developed during Mr. Grant's time, to deliver integrated programs and services for the holistic development of children, and to promote the resource center concept as a community mobilizing force integral to early childhood development and child survival. A number of projects focusing on parenting education have also been undertaken. A parenting program called Learning Through Play was first introduced and funded by Hinks Delcrest Center in Toronto and funded by JCIF and the American Friends of Jamaica. The importance of science and environmental education have also been addressed through projects. The Environmental Foundation of Jamaica and the United Nations Development Program funded a pilot program in promotion of an understanding and appreciation of biodiversity in Jamaican basic schools. And from 2016 to 2018, the Grace Kennedy Foundation funded a 2-year STEAM, Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Maths project based at the Grace Kennedy Foundation STEM Laboratory in downtown Kingston. And the trust worked with students 3 to 5 years, teachers and parents, to develop critical thinking skills among students in relation to the STEAM curriculum. An absence of funding, but a commitment to continuing influence in early childhood landscape led to the staging of annual expositions. So we funded by Jamaica National Building Society, the Early Childhood Commission, other partners, resource center managers, basic school teachers attended, and there were resources displayed and conference topics, workshops organized around specific themes. And in 2013, we replaced the expositions with an early childhood development conference annually, and it was felt that these conferences would expose practitioners to research and best practices which could assist them in their teaching learning environments. In 2015, we had a special year, and Bernard Van Leer Foundation still felt the link had been established, and so their senior advisor came and delivered the Dudley Grant Memorial Lecture at the centenary of the birth of Mr. Grant. That lecture was called A Good Start, Advising Early Childhood Development. And we had a week of celebrations, which are church service, birthday celebrations, etc., etc. The last conference was one of the things that was done was the production of the Dudley Grant story, written in a form which would be available to our basic school children, and it was distributed to all basic schools island-wide. The last conference was held in 2019. It was the 30th anniversary of the Dudley Grant Memorial Trust. The work of the trust has been limited in recent years because of an absence of funds, and the advent of COVID has completely halted the trust's activities. The trust is extremely indebted to its volunteer administrator, Mrs. Maisie Wint, who is here, and who managed the secretariat of the trust for several years, and also served as project director for parenting projects. The trust has tried over its 36-year existence to sustain the legacy of Mr. Grant and to be a strong advocate and participant in activities geared towards the improvement of early childhood education, care, and development in Jamaica. The human and financial cost of children in crisis is far greater than the investment in effective early intervention. The preschool programs which we implement must address the needs of the whole child. And through the Early Childhood Commission, we know that measurable, quantitative, tangible outcomes are being assessed. I've heard of today, for the first time, and Rebecca, don't ask me what I mean, but SQJ and JSRA are on stream, but these tangible outcomes can be measured. But I think we need also to focus on the intangible, less easily assessed qualitative ones. Literacy and numeracy are tangible outcomes, but as important are the intangibles, the development of self-esteem among our children, their development of their learning potential, developing creative ways of learning, problem solving, and an excitement about satisfying curiosity. I see too many pictures of basic schools where children are sitting in rows, in classrooms, in rows, and with desks in front of them, and not in groups playing and having corners and play corners and things that will stimulate them to think creatively. I think also that, and I can tell from what I've heard this morning and what I've been hearing, is that yes, we are making provision for children with disabilities, children with special needs, children with different styles of learning. And I hope that this will continue because we do need to meet the needs of all our children. Investment and support for early childhood education doesn't produce immediate outcomes, apart from, the little test scores and so, but in a Jamaica, where we are constantly distressed about maladjusted youth and criminal elements, it is vital that this level of education be used to create a strong foundation for living and readying our youngest citizens for meeting the challenges of a very complex and difficult environment. Just a personal note, I think you will have understood that I admired Mr. Grant very much. He was passionate about early childhood education. He was very jovial and had an engaging personality. He used every opportunity to inform and persuade others of the importance of learning during this phase of a child's life. I benefited both personally and professionally from my involvement with his work and will always be grateful for his guidance, influence, and mentorship. He was a devoted husband to his wife, Jean, and he was a dedicated deacon at the East Queen Street Baptist Church, where at his request, his ashes are interred. We continue to look through that windscreen and remember that our rear view mirror reveals to us the foundation on which our future plans are built. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Leo Riney. Do we have any quick comments or questions? Just one or two, because we're over time. Any? All right. I think we can all agree, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, that we have had a series of rich and engaging presentations and discussions. As we close the first day of the colloquium, I present to you a brief summary. So we talked a lot about funding and the need for increased resources for the sector. We talked too about the importance of partnerships for the furtherance of early childhood education. The Education Minister provided an update on some of the work being done to support the sector post-disaster thus far. She also underscored the ministry's commitment to support the sector in this regard in the long run. She also invited the university to share its research to inform policy. More than one presenter spoke about the building of awareness among parents about the importance of prenatal care and its impact on young children. We talked too about the importance of early childhood education for improved outcomes in later years of life. We also talked too about the importance of the provision of significant psychosocial support, not just for the young children, but for the parents and other stakeholders of the sector. Our discussions included the importance of building climate-resilient infrastructure now that we're grappling with climate change and all that comes with it. The importance of sustainability was mentioned repeatedly. So too the need to build multiple types of resilience as we soldier through the impacts of climate change. We also need to learn from countries that have similar contexts as ours and are similarly vulnerable. So shared experiences, learned lessons and best practices, we're urged to contemplate those. Of note, we were urged for our children to become agents of change and not just passive consumers of change that we're trying to implement. We need to see disaster preparedness as a way of life in the Caribbean, and we also need to to increase the importance of having data for decision making going forward. We were urged also to reimagine the early childhood education in a shifting context because we are operating within the context of climate and other changes in the region. We were also encouraged to treat our boys in the early childhood setting in a particular way so that their outcomes do not continue to lag behind those of girls. Of note, we are grappling too, with the loss of human resources to brain drain. So we need to look at how it is we could recruit and retain special needs personnel to improve outcomes in our sector. Dr. DePerry spoke of the practical tools in instructional design and how it is we could integrate artificial intelligence, for example, for creating relevant content for resilience. So we have a lot to mull over based on what has transpired here today. I stand here today as a proud daughter of an early childhood educator who was a graduate of the Shortwood Teachers College. My mother was someone who championed education, especially early childhood education, noting its importance as a critical foundation for building futures for children. She constantly hailed the work of stalwarts in education, such as the legendary DRB Grant and Professor Errol Miller. Of course, I didn't make sense of it at that time. But like Miss Fanton, I am a country girl who grew up seeing her mother collect bottle caps to help young children build their numeracy skills, cutting up cereal and toothpaste boxes to write on and use as reading materials. I also recall her buying her own chalk, her own cartridge paper, her own markers, so resources have always been a challenge. All those when I was a small girl, many decades ago, right? So today I learned that it's called turning trashables into treasures. The same kind of creativity and resourcefulness are needed today as we seek to advance the sector. We acknowledge significant resource constraints, but we refuse to be hamstrung by them. Let us endeavor to optimize whatever we have at our disposal as we pool hands and hearts for this work. If we use the Bible as a reference point, the widow used her oil, David used his slingshot, Moses used his staff. Let us use what we have. It is therefore a sort of full circle moment for me to be here today. I'm therefore grateful to be associated with this event as we seek to soldier on with this very important work. We look forward to day 2 of the colloquium, which promises to be as rich and engaging as day 1 was, as we continue to build on the legacy of the legendary Dudley grant. As I close, I want to leave us with 1 or 2 quotes as we weave into our conversations this business of collaboration, partnership, resilience, and preparedness. So, about preparedness, Bobby Akart says, because you never know when the day before is the day before, prepare for tomorrow. Alain de Botton says, a good half of the art of living is resilience. Helen Keller says, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your engagement today. We look forward to welcoming you back tomorrow for day 2. Best wishes for safe travel home.